Example 2 is made up of two pieces, letter A and letter B. And in this case, we're going to talk about how we can use our graphing calculators to find our maxes, mins, and zeros. So if we're given a situation where we don't have time, or we don't have the means of being able to, or if we know the exact number of turning points, if we're in a situation where we don't know the exact number of turning points, we can figure that out by using our graphing calculators. So in example 2, we want to graph each function on our graphing calculator. We want to identify the zeros and the coordinates where our local mins and max occurs. Okay. So in this situation, I've got my graphing calculator set here for you. And we're going to plug in our equation, or our function, using the y equals button. So y equals, and I'm going to plug in x to the third power minus 2x squared plus 4. X to the third minus 2x squared plus 4. Now if I do that in my window, our general window for the most part when we're graphing is negative 10, 10, negative 10, 10. That's our x min and our x max, our y min and our y max. That just tells you how big your coordinate plane is going to look when you graph. And then when I hit my graph button, let's slide this up a little bit. When I hit my graph button, you're going to see that graph appear in front of you. A couple of things that you know about this graph. One, from the graph itself, you know you have 1 0. You also have 1 max, and you've got 1 min. But we want to come up with the ordered pair of those estimated values. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by using our calc button. And our calc button is actually that little value, or that little button on top of the trace button. So it's that calc part above our trace. So if we hit second calc, or second trace, and get to our calculate button, there's 0, which is number 2, minimum number 3, and maximum, which is number 4 on our calculator. So let's do the zeros first. To estimate your 0, you click on that number 2, and you've got a little bit of a tracer right here. Alright? And then your calculator will ask you your left bound, and then it would again ask you your right bound. So what you want to do is you want to move that cursor left and right using your scrolls. Left so that you're a little bit under where that 0 occurs, and then hit enter. It's going to ask you for a right bound, which wants to know if you scroll up just a little bit above where your 0 occurs and hit enter. It then asks you to guess, and then you hit enter again, and it guesses where that 0 occurs. So from my values here, it's telling me that I have a negative 1.13 comma 0 for my ordered pair for the 0. To get back to do your maximum and minimum, you want to then go back to second calc, or second trace, which is your calc button, and you want to now, let's do our minimum next, which is number 3. You hit enter. It asks you for a left and a right bound, so that means you have to locate where your minimum occurs. So I want to take my cursor a little bit to the left of my minimum and hit enter. Scroll a little bit to the right of my minimum, hit enter again, and it will estimate where that minimum occurs. And that minimum happens at 1.33 if I round it to the nearest hundredth, and my y value at 2.81. Last but not least, we want to estimate our maximum. So if we go to second trace again, scroll down to maximum, it asks for a left bound, so I scroll a little left to where my maximum occurs. I scroll a little right to where my maximum occurs, and I hit enter again, and it's going to estimate that point. The one thing I want to make sure you guys notice is when you're given a value for x, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so that you guys can see this. In this case, my x value is negative 1.269 e to the negative 6. Remember your scientific notation. Remember that 10 to the negative number? Your e in your graphing calculator is like 10 to the negative 6. When you have something that's e to a negative or a really big number, it either gets really small or really big. So e to the negative 6 is telling you that you have something really, really small, a decimal. You're moving your decimal spot to the 6 left. So it's a really small number. Whenever you see e to a negative number, we're going to estimate that value to be 0 because it's very, very close to 0. So for our maximum, since x is equal to a number that has e to a negative value, we're going to estimate our x to be 0 and our y value is 4. So using that now, we can estimate on our coordinate graph off to the right where those points are. So negative 1.13 would kind of be there, 0.4 would be there, and 1.3 and 2.8 would kind of be there. And you can use what you know about your graph to estimate or sketch your graph that looks very similar to your graph on the graphing calculator. Alright, so let's look at our next video, which will go over letter B.